Let's talk about protein. How much protein do you need per day? How to calculate how much protein you need per day? Quality of your protein, and is the protein you're tracking actually accurate? How much protein can you have per meal? And protein timing. When should you have your protein and is it safe? Protein after breakdown is essentially just amino acids. Your body needs a set number of amino acids so it can build some muscle. So plant proteins have very dissimilar set of amino acids compared to animal protein. So if you're having most of your protein sources coming from plants, there will be a lower quality protein compared to a higher quality protein like meat. What do I mean by the quality of protein? The quality of protein is actually an indexed measure. It's called PDCAAS, PDCAAS. This score is a measure of 0 to 100, and if you have a score of 100, that means every gram of protein is actually 1 gram of protein that can be utilized by your body towards muscle protein synthesis. Then only if you have a score of 0.5 or if you have a score of 50%, then for every 1 gram of that protein you consume, only 0.5 grams of that protein can be used towards muscle protein synthesis, and the rest is just burned off as energy. In the spectrum of PDCAAS, to give you some examples, dairy meat like fish, chicken, beef, whatever, they score really high. They usually have a PDCAAS score of greater than 0.9 or 90%. And plant proteins, chickpea, cooked rice, they score even lower at 0.25, which is just 25% of every gram of protein you get from that gets used towards muscle protein synthesis, and the rest is simply burnt off as energy. Another important factor inside of protein that you want to be aware of is leucine. So leucine is also an indicator of how high quality that protein is, because leucine contains something called mTOR, and mTOR stimulates muscle growth. And if you see, whey protein has a leucine content of 3 grams for every 145 calories. At the same time, chicken has a leucine content of 3 grams for every 220 calories. But if you want that same 3 grams of leucine from, let's say, wheat bread, you'll have to consume 2069 calories of wheat bread. That simply shows how low of quality of protein wheat bread is. Same goes for brown rice, peas, etc. In general, plant proteins do not have that high of a PDCAAS score, and because of that they don't have a lot of leucine content, and because of that most of whatever you're consuming gets just burnt off as energy. Only parts of it gets utilized towards muscle protein synthesis. That being said, if you have plant proteins with some chicken and some very high quality proteins, there is some sort of a balancing effect, but I would recommend you eat at least 50% of your proteins from a protein source with a PDCAAS score greater than 90%. Next, let's talk about how to calculate how much protein you need. The WHO standard is you need 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, but if you lift and if your intention is to build muscle, then you probably need a lot more. The general consensus of how much protein you need is 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But if you are a very heavy person, let's say you are 140 kgs or 120 kgs plus and you're very high in body fat percentage, then this calculation does not work for you, because the amount of protein requirement for you, it becomes a lot higher and unnecessary. So then you need to calculate your protein using a simple formula. So let's say you're 30% body fat and you are 120 kgs. You need to calculate the protein requirement of the 10% body fat version of you. To give you an example, the 120 kg person is 30% body fat. You remove 20% body fat, so that is 24 kgs, that is 96 kgs. So for the 96 kg version of you, how much protein do you need? You just multiply that by 2, and that is 190 grams of protein. So if you can have 190 grams of protein, that is way more than sufficient, as opposed to eating 240 250 grams of protein if you calculated it using your previous weight. So now that we know how much protein we need to eat and you know what kinds of protein we need to eat, let's talk about how much protein you can have per meal. Okay, let's go back to the WHO example again. You need 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. Let's say you're a 60 kg individual and you want to meet your protein goals, so you just put 3 scoops of whey and you're like, this is 60 grams of protein, I'm just going to have this first thing in the morning and I'm not going to have any other protein sources the rest of the day. If you're that kind of a person, then chances are the protein that you're having in each meal actually matters a lot, because when this person has his high protein shake in the morning and it doesn't have any food for a large chunk of rest of the day, a large chunk of his protein shake simply gets prioritized for energy and not muscle building. Your body always prioritizes energy, because without energy you die, and muscle is always a luxury, and muscle is only catered to when everything else is taken care of. So when your food gets digested and if there is already sufficient energy in your body, only then the protein doesn't get sacrificed for energy, and rather it is used for what it is intended for, and that is muscle building. There was a study conducted and they concluded the following things. They concluded that splitting up your meals with even amounts of protein is probably the best thing for muscle protein synthesis. And there was another study that was conducted that calculates the amount of protein you can have per meal in the most optimal manner without it getting sacrificed for energy. There was this formula that was derived from it, which is you need 0.55 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per meal if you're having 4 evenly split meals in a day. So the study was done by Schoenfeld and Argan in 2019, and to give you some more examples, a 150-pound male can have 27 grams of protein per meal, and for a 200-pound male, it's 50 grams of protein. The heavier you are, the more protein you can ingest per session. The logic behind this is simply because your body already has a lot of energy because you're a larger individual. So protein does not get sacrificed that easily for energy. And if you're a person who lifts, you are more sensitive to muscle protein synthesis than energy, because the muscle also requires a lot of damage needing attending to. This all being said, all this I've been learning in my recent years. But when I started out, I used to do intermittent fasting and I used to have greater than 40-50 grams of protein in each meal, and I was still progressing really well. So this is more advanced and more for people who are going to get on stage, who want to cut below 10% body fat and still have their muscle. But for most regular people, as long as you're hitting your daily protein goal, you are good to go. Like, you don't have to think about any of this way too much. Just make sure you're hitting your daily protein goal and make sure at least 50% of that is coming from protein sources with the podcast score greater than 90%. I also want to mention there's another easier way to calculate the amount of protein you need if you're a heavier individual. You can just take your height in centimeters and eat 1 gram per centimeter of your height. If you do the math, it actually comes down roughly the same amount of what the formula we discussed previously in the video. So let's talk about protein timing now. So now you know the quality of protein, how much protein you need, how much protein you can have per meal. Now let's talk about protein timing. When should you time your protein? This topic also largely does not matter too much unless if you work out early in the morning fasted. So I work out early in the morning and I work out fasted. So I try to make sure I take my high quality protein as soon as I'm done with my workout, because my body is in a very depleted state. So I have my whey protein shake at the gym itself. If you train in the morning, it's probably the best to do the same. But if you train in the evening, it does not matter too much, because throughout the day you've already been eating a lot of protein, a lot of food. So that's already there in your system. So your body will instantly start utilizing that as soon as it senses damage to the muscles incurred from the gym. Also, before sleeping, if you can feed yourself some good high quality protein, close to 30 to 40 grams, it does sure to have a slightly beneficial effect, because over the night you are going to be sleeping, you will be recovering, and some sort of a protein in your system when you are sleeping and recovering helps to prioritize muscle protein synthesis. Let's talk about protein safety. How safe is protein? A bunch of studies have been done, numerous amount of studies, and they've always tried to push the limits of protein. Like in this video, we're just discussing 1 gram per pound of body weight. These guys have pushed it to 2 grams, 3 grams per pound of body weight, 4 grams per pound of body weight, and they've still not found any negative effects coming from protein. So whatever numbers we're mentioning in this video and whatever numbers people mention in most videos in the YouTube science space is very, very safe. You don't have to worry about it. Just make sure it comes from high quality protein sources, and just make sure you're hitting your daily protein goal. You don't have to do anything extra anyways, okay? To recap, in this video we've learned about how much protein you need. We talked about the quality of your protein. So we talked about podcast scores, and basically at least 50% of the protein you're eating should come from a protein source that has a podcast score greater than 90%. And we talked about how much protein you can have per meal, and we derived a formula for, let's say it is 0.55 grams per kilogram of body weight per meal if you're having 4 meals a day, which is the most optimal amount of meals you should have per day, especially if you're struggling with weight gain rather than weight loss. And then we talked about protein timing. So essentially, if you're working out fasted, make sure you're having your high quality protein right after your workout. And it's beneficial if you can have some high quality protein right before going to sleep, because it helps in recovery and prioritizing muscle protein synthesis through the night. Okay, so that's it for this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a like. A lot of videos like this are coming. Thank you so much for watching.